Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and we are lifelong Catholics, and what we do is all for free, and for our love of Jesus Christ, and for our Holy Mother, the Church, and we'll defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today we're going to finish where we left off on how the CIA ratcheted up the psychological warfare in Session 3 of the Second Vatican Council. And it's going to deal on a lot of Richard Cardinal Cushing of Boston. And we welcome Brother Alexis to the program.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. It's always a pleasure and honor. And it's of great interest to me, this long series we're doing on the doctrinal warfare program that the U.S. declared against the Catholic Church, and which started in '53 and is still ongoing. And this is an excellent book we're reading from. So let everyone know, I highly recommend this book. I have asked my benefactors to get me 4 copies. It's called John Courtney Murray, Time, Life, and the American Proposition, and it's subtitled
How the CIA Doctrinal Warfare Program Changed the Catholic Church by David A. Wimhoff, a lawyer in South Bend, Indiana, law professor at Notre Dame University.
And in that title, Change, you could probably put took down, because that's pretty much what it is. It isn't just changed. It attempted and is attempting to utterly destroy the Catholic Church as an institution, and which is a satanic anti-Christic plot. And that's why we're doing this program, because Order Militaris Catholicus is an international association of Catholics dedicated to defending Catholics from persecution. And what's the worst source of persecution but an actual national government that's trying to destroy our church? So this is an excellent book. I highly recommend you get a copy before they're all sold out, since we're publicizing it gratis without any remuneration in this program. So, but today's program is particularly interesting to me, because I grew up in Rhode Island. I lived many years in Massachusetts, and I went to minor seminary in Boston. So I know of Cardinal Cushing, even though I never met him, and I've met many people who knew him, and I've been in the places that we'll shortly mention in his biography. So this is like a story about home in a certain sort of way.
Yeah.
So what is the really juicy quote in Wim Hof's book about Cushing, so we know how intimate of a role he played in the destruction of the Catholic faith?
Yeah, before we get there, I wanted to crack the first opening paragraph. It's right now, it's in this book, it's the start of the Vietnam War, so-called Gulf of Tonkin incident, which by now has been rightly claimed a false flag operation by the CIA to get us into an unjust war to take down a French Catholic country of Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. That's one error in Wim Hof's book. He doesn't realize it was a false flag, but he might, just because you're a historian expert in one field doesn't mean you know everything. So.
Ooh, the juicy quote. Halfway around the world, the Americans planned their aggression for a declaration on religious liberty for the third session of the council. To that end, they needed a leader, an army, and weapons. Cardinal Cushing was to lead the effort. The army was the U.S. bishops, and Murray provided the weapons in the form of ideas.
And he's leaving out a big weapon there is a lot of slush money. So most people don't know who is this Cardinal Cushing of Boston. So we're going to do a little background on his biography so you know why they chose him.
Yeah, so Cushing was born in South Boston, City Point, August 24th, 1895. The third of 5 children, the son of Patrick and Mary Cushing. His parents were both Irish immigrants. His father was originally from Gainworth County, Cork. His mother from Tornaheeny County, Waterford. His father, who came to the United States in 1880, worked as a blacksmith and earned $18 per week in the trolley repair pits of Boston Elevated Railway. So, Cushing receives an early education at Perry Public Grammar School in South Boston. And then he's like, and then couldn't go to any parish schools because there wasn't one at the Gate of Heaven parish. Cushing dropped out of high school in his freshman year because of his compulsive truancy. But then he entered Boston College High School, a Jesuit college preparatory school. His tuition there was paid by his cousin, who was a priest of the Archdiocese of New York. Cushing graduated high school in 1913, receiving honors for Latin and Greek. That's going to come up pretty soon in this book.
So he was involved in truancy in high school. It doesn't sound like a seminarian. Dropped out of high school. They didn't have the laws back then. He had to attend high school. I guess his parents decided to send him to Jesuit school to kind of save his education. But did he want to be a priest or did he want to be a politician?
He originally wanted to be a politician, even earning money by speaking for politicians from the back of wagons. He twice considered joining the Jesuits, but came to the conclusion he was cut out more for the active life and not the teaching apostolate.
Okay, so, well, that kind of sounds positive. Somehow in Jesuit school, he decided he's going to become a priest rather than marry and have a family. That's really a big transformation, I'd say, there, from being a truant to wanting to be a priest. Though I can tell you, as a vocation myself, that doesn't happen. If you have a vocation of a priest, you are someone who observes all the rules, all the regulations, you love order, you cannot stand disobedience. That's just inculcated in you. It's not like you go from street knife wielding kid to priest. Now, it does happen. It does happen. I actually had a confrere who was in a gang and ended up being a priest. He had a criminal record, but it was for violence or things like that. It wasn't for anything involving the 6th and 9th commandment. But that's a big transformation, I'd say.
So in 1913, he enters Boston College, the university now, becoming a member of the first freshman class following the college move to Chestnut Hill. At Boston College, he was active in the Marquette Debating Society, elected vice president of his sophomore class. Following the sinking of the RMS Lusitania in 1915, another deep state operation. You guys into the First World War. We covered that in the previous program. Cushing enlisted in the United States Army, but was medically discharged for asthma.
That's very noble. If you have asthma, to sign up right for the Army. I have to praise him for that. I'd say that's probably one of the few members of the Catholic hierarchy in the United States with that kind of zeal. I have to name Bishop Rene Henry Cressida, who was actually a tail gunner in a flying fortress in the Second World War. Other than that, I don't know of veterans in the clergy. So he
after attending Boston College for 2 years, he began his studies for the priesthood at St. John's Seminaries in Brighton in September in 1915. He was assigned to continue his studies at the Pontifical North American College in Rome, but the U-boat activity escalated and prevented him from crossing the Atlantic. So in 1921, May 26, Cushing was ordained a priest by Cardinal William Henry O'Connell at the Cathedral of Holy Cross. His first assignment was a curate at St. Patrick's Church in Roxbury, where he remained for 2 months. He afterwards transferred to St. Benedict's Church in Somerville. In 1922, he appeared unannounced at the residence of Cardinal O'Connell to request an assignment as a missionary. The young priest declared he wanted to take heaven by storm. O'Connell denied his request, instead appointed him his assistant director of the Boston office of the Society of the Propagation of Faith.
Okay, so I can see a new priest to be assigned to a parish before he gets a long-term assignment. So he's 9 months into his first assignment, and he just flees the parish one day and asks the bishop to send him overseas.
Mm-hmm.
That is bizarre. Okay, especially in that epoch when you had spiritual directors and people were very organized. He had been to a Jesuit school, so he should have acquired a lot of self-control of his character. That's just bizarre. And he's appointed his assistant director of propagation of the faith. It kind of, what I understand that he was taken out of parish service and he was put behind a desk to do talks about the missions and raise money for the missions.
Yep.
And that's really strange. He wanted an active life and he didn't really, he jumped from the ship right from the beginning. So, well, that raises a lot of questions, but I don't know anything about. However, he remains head of the Society of Propagation for the Faith for what, like 20 years? No?
Yeah. He became the director in
And,
1939 to 1944. He was raised to the rank of Monsignor in 1939. And then June 10th of 1939, after Bishop Francis Spellman was named Archbishop of New York, Cushing was appointed at the request of Cardinal O'Connell as Auxiliary Bishop of Boston and titular Bishop of Manila by Pope Pius XII. He received this.
okay, so
Yeah.
I was going to say this. If you're head of Society for Propagation of Faith, lots of money is passing through your hands to bishops over the seas. So that would make you friends of a lot of people in Rome and a lot of people in South America and Africa and Asia.
Mm-hmm. And his co-consecrators were John Bertram Peterson and Thomas Addis Emmet, a Jesuit. And even though he was auxiliary bishop, he was just, kept on the desk of the Society of the Propagation of Faith and was named pastor of Sacred Heart Church in Newton Center.
Mm-hmm.
Then April 1944, Cardinal O'Connell dies. Then Cushing is made the boss, apostolic administrator.
And then becomes Archbishop and Cardinal of Boston.
Yep. Then we have the famous scene where people are now calling certain people Feenites.
Yeah. So before we begin the Father Feeney controversy, before we get into that, it's going to seem absolutely bizarre that someone who is working for the Society of the Propagation of the Faith, which basically supports dioceses, spread the faith around the world, should be upset that there's a Jesuit at Harvard saying, well, you have to be a member of the Catholic Church to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
It's bizarre. So,
yeah.
What does Wim Hof say about this controversy?
Doesn't say anything. We're still reading from Wikipedia.
Okay, go ahead.
So, after he becomes the Archbishop, Boston would see the excommunication of Father Feeney for the stringent interpretation of the Catholic doctrine. There is no salvation outside the Church. Feeney refused to back down from his position, and Wikipedia says he reconciled with the Church, but he never left the Church.
Okay, so the facts on this case is Feeney was not excommunicated for his doctrine. Cushing, through his friends in Rome, got Feeney to be called to Rome to be questioned at the Holy Office about it. Feeney decided not to go because he figured it was rigged, and he was excommunicated for not coming. And which back then wasn't this strong sanction we have today of excommunication. It was simply disciplinary punishment. So it didn't put you outside the church. It wasn't that kind of excommunication. So his doctrine was never condemned. But Cushing, Cushing had a crusade against Father Feeney, because it just irked him personally that someone is preaching you had to die a Catholic to be saved. And why might that be, AJ?
So, Cushing was honored by Bernard Burth as Man of the Year in 1956 for lifetime distinguished service to the cause of human brotherhood under God and further recognition of great leadership in the fields of education and community relations. And that organization is what?
It's a Jewish civil rights organization. That's how it styles itself. But it's really a Jewish pressure organization against people who don't accept their view of how world history should go. And I'll put some light on this because I lived in Boston. Under Cushing, there begins this real estate scam that it goes on as far as I know, even to this day. What happens is a Jewish businessman will donate huge sums of money to the archdiocese. Why would he do that? He's Jewish. The diocese accepts the money, and then as a favor, they let him use a building for $1 a year for like 5-10 years on a contract. He doesn't put it down as a capital gain. He actually takes the donation as a charitable donation. The diocese declares only $1 as income because they can't rent property. They have to pay taxes on that. And the donation and the rental seem to be unrelated. And so it's tax evasion on both sides of the fence. And almost everyone in Boston knows about this who follows the details. And if the FBI looks into it, they could probably go back on the IRS. You could probably go back 50 years on unpaid taxes and get the archdiocese and a whole bunch of Jewish businessmen in jail. But I'll just throw that out there because I'm a lover of justice, and I don't like Catholic bishops being bribed by non-Catholics. But more than that, he has a personal reason, doesn't he?
Yeah, the author James Carroll, in his book on Cushing, well, his sister Dolly Cushing is married to a Jewish haberdasher, Dick Perlstein.
Okay, so here we have in the 50s, or maybe the 40s, Irish girl whose brother is a bishop marries a Jew outside the Catholic Church. This is like absolute scandal, and it would be unheard of. And in a devout Catholic family, it would have never happened. I'm not saying Jewish men are bad. It's just that it's part of the traditions and rules of Irish society and of Catholic society to marry a Catholic, so that you have your marriage is blessed sacramentally, and you have that grace, and so that your children are raised Catholic. To marry outside the church was considered bizarre, shameful, almost scandalous, I would say, and that epoch certainly would be. And the Irish of South Boston are known in that era, married Irish. There would be a lot of talk if they married an Italian or a Pole or something like that, but to marry a Jewish haberdasher? Okay, so you're the archbishop and your sister married a Jewish haberdasher and you're going after a Jesuit. It says you must die a Catholic to be saved. Doesn't look good on Cushing's plate. And these are the reasons why the CIA wanted Cushing to lead the charge, because he was personally compromised. He was not only his sister, but he was probably being bribed by Jews on the one hand, involved in tax evasion. So they had him by the vital organs to get him to do what they wanted, which was to destroy the Catholic doctrine on salvation, so that you would have to become a member, because in the 50s, whole sections of the world were becoming Catholic. The Masons were terrified by the fact, and their fears were justified, because now in Africa, countries like Zaire are almost completely Catholic. Huge sections of Africa have been converted, hundreds of millions of people. The church in Africa is just exploding, and they were trying to break that down. They were trying to destroy that. If we stay faithful to Christ, we can convert the world. And the Masons know that, and this is why they attacked so centrally the doctrine on Catholic-Jewish relations at the Second Vatican Council. So that's our background on Cardinal Cushing. You know who he is, who he was.
I'm going to quote this again from Time International. Time selected Cushing as the leader of the campaign because they considered him a personification of the Catholicism of tomorrow, and such made him the subject of a cover story in August 21st, 1964 edition of Time, which was juxtaposed to one on the Pope in the same issue. Time depicted the Pope in a negative light as weak, but presented Cushing as the face of love itself, the best the church had to offer. He was in tune with the times, and he personally illustrates the stirring of that placid giant of the Roman Catholicism, the church in the U.S. Cushing was glowingly presented as helping the poor of Peru by pouring milk into the bowls of the orphans, blessing new churches in the slums. The same article which lauded Cushing criticized McNair and served to endorse a pro-American view within the church. According to Time, the American Catholic renewal can be credited to a spiritual fallout from the Vatican Council and the church-wide modernization unleashed by Pope John. Signs of change in the case of the American Catholic Church are always signs of maturation. Truest signs of American Catholic maturity is development and vociferous presence of something that has been rather grandly called the renewal elite. It includes bishops, priests, seminarians, and sisters, but its driving force is a young, college-trained laity that accepts the Church's essential mysteries and matters of faith while questioning the authoritarian way moral theologians reduce these dogmas to terms of practical behavior. As one California Jesuit puts it, the catechism answers don't satisfy anymore. Thank God.
This is an article of utter blasphemy and a completely false narrative. And as we mentioned before, when Time and Life says thank God or quotes God, they mean Satan. That's who they mean. Okay. So here is a program of complete hatred and disdain. You wonder where the aggiornamento came from. Okay, so don't blame the German theologians, the French theologians, and don't even blame the Second Vatican Council. Put the blame where it is. The CIA, the American Masonic Lodges, who introduced that into the council and architecturally designed the destruction of the church from within. So if you're trying to implement Vatican II, you're really doing what the CIA wants you to do. You're not doing what Jesus Christ or the Holy Spirit wants you to do. And this is a very important point. What more do they say about Cushing's effort at the council?
Yeah, I'm trying to find where that's right here. Cushing was the one who most actively supported what Time called church renewal. While he was depicted as a doer rather than an original thinker, he gained the approval of Time and the Americans by demonstrating acceptance of the American spirit. Cushing was lauded for being a life member of the NAACP, calling his clerical robes glad rags, and having little use for the trappings of his office. In addition, he was quoted as saying that his prayer at JFK's inauguration in 1961, patients stick together, didn't seem to do any good, depicted as fostering goodwill among men of other faiths, and being the product of South Boston's melting pot ghetto. Cushing was, by Time's own estimation, a typical American Catholic prelate, a tireless fundraiser out of the mold of brick and mortar prelates. Indeed, some laymen complain he thinks of nothing else, but the money went to a number of projects both in and out of his archdiocese that was growing. Several of these projects were the renovation of cathedrals, churches overseas in places like Formosa, Tanganyika, and the birthplace of Pope John. but an offer to pay for the stimulation, the simultaneous translation system for the ecumenical council was declined by the Pope. Cushing was presented as a positive, progressive, sympathetic American figure motivated to help others, growing his archdiocese and suffering from various ailments at the same time.
It sounds to me like a truant student and freshman in high school. The way this guy's running the archdiocese.
Yeah.
Someone who wants to buck law, doesn't like law, and wants to bring the serfdom down. So there's been a lot of talk about people intentionally recruited by Freemasonry to destroy the church from within. And I think you definitely have to put that question mark over Cardinal Cushing, because you can see the way he's running the church as Archbishop and Cardinal and how he acted as a young man being truant in the first freshman year of high school, they go together.
Yeah.
And there's an error in that discourse. South Boston isn't multiracial. It was entirely Irish. You wouldn't meet anyone black there or anything like that. So that's just propaganda.
Yeah. And they'll close it out. Okay, that was weird.
That's
At
a
this
win.
point, okay. At this point, the discussion in time allowed William Story, then a professor at Pittsburgh Duquesne University, to introduce the trajectory of all the so-called reforms of the church by saying that Cushing fits in with the new spirit, but I wonder if he realizes that the whole process must go a lot further. And here comes time. Time then explained that going a lot further would include approval of married deacons, lay election of bishops, general adoption of civilian dress in place of clerical black and Roman colors, the abolition of such medieval practices as ring kissing, ermine-trimmed robes for cardinals, the right of Catholics to contract mixed marriages for Protestant ministers. Perhaps the greatest possibility is that of a person-centered theology of marriage that owes more to Martin Buber's I-thou relationship than to canon law, and thus might resolve the most troubling moral issue that faces U.S. Catholics today: birth control. Cushing was not the originator rebel theologian, theoretrician, or organizer of the change. As the magazine explained, he was the one who gave the renewal a push, or in other words, led the church to eliminate aspects of unfreedom. As another time darling Hans Kuhn said,
This is utterly diabolic. This shows you that when the Freemasons say they want to be friendly to the Catholic Church, what they mean is they want to completely and utterly destroy us. Every last thing about us and every part of our Catholic society, intellectual heritage and ecclesiastic usage. They just want to completely wipe out the whole thing. And this is just so diabolic. This is just unbelievable. I will add this historic footnote. It's under Cushing that the problems with pedophilia get sown and start exploding. We wouldn't learn about it for another 30 years, but it was under him that these pedophiles were recruited into the priesthood of the Diocese of Boston. Now, does that sound like a truant student in high school? So what was, and why did the sister of Cushing not even take his religion seriously and marry someone who's not Catholic? That's usually a sign that you don't believe the Catholic faith is true. I'm not saying that's always the case, but it's often a case. So now you know where the document, the Second Vatican Council, Nostra Aetate, the statement on Catholic-Jewish relations comes from. It doesn't come from people with clean hands, let us say. There's a lot of politics and a lot of malign, malevolent intent behind the push, and probably a lot of bribe money, because as a cardinal archbishop who sent money to all dioceses around the world, he can count on bishops at the council to vote the way he would want.
Yep. So this is going to end on this part, but in our next program, we're going to be talking about the spirit of Vatican II. And we told you about the man who founded that term and started to push it, that Swedish, Jewish, Italian trader person. But the man who really got it pushed and that got its foothold everywhere is none other than lay writer and Catholic, Michael Novak.
Okay, so that will be a very enlightening program. Thank you, AJ, for having me on Ordo Militaris Radio TV.
Yep. This is Order Military Studio TV signing off. Day is full.
Day is full.